The scream echoed through the cave, sharp and guttural, before cutting off, abruptly, chillingly, like a knife to a throat. I spun my flashlight toward the sound, and there it was, a hand, pale and twitching, being dragged into the shadows by something too fast to see. Maria! Fragments. The echoes twisted and stretched. Her name, making it sound foreign, sinister. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive dark, illuminating nothing but cold stone and emptiness. She'd been ahead of us moments ago. I told them. I told all of them. Not to wander off. Stay. Close, I said. But there's always someone who thinks they know better. Now she was gone. Maria! I called again, my voice tinged with frustration and something worse. Fear. Then, faintly, her voice floated back to me. The sound of her cry froze me in place. It wasn't just faint. It was off. The way it echoed didn't fade naturally. Instead, it lingered, circling back in fragments, as if the cave itself was repeating her words. "We can't just leave her," one of them, Sarah, whispered. Her wide eyes darted to the shadows, beyond my flashlight beam. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Stay here. I'll go check." I didn't wait for a response. My boots crunched against the gravel as I stepped forward, the chill of the cave seeping through my jacket. The walls seemed to close in tighter the further I went, my breath shallow in the suffocating air. Her voice came again, closer this time. "Please, help." I followed it, deeper and deeper, the beam of my flashlight quivering as my hand shook. Then I saw it, her scarf, snagged on a jagged rock. My heart sank. "Maria?" I called out again, my voice trembling. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, plunging the tunnel into darkness for a split second. When it came back on, my pulse thundered in my ears. At the edge of the beam, something moved. A shadow, just out of reach. "Maria?" I whispered, though the word barely left my lips. The figure didn't respond. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had melted into the flesh. He screamed, and the room got silent for a moment. The stone. I turned back toward the group, walking faster than I wanted to admit, my hands clammy against the flashlight. "Just shadows," I muttered to myself, though I didn't believe it. The air felt heavier, the silence thicker, as if the cave had swallowed my voice. When I rejoined the group, I forced a smile. "She's probably just ahead, let's keep moving." But I knew better. This wasn't the first time someone had vanished in these caves. Deep down, I knew it wouldn't be the last. I didn't want to tell them what I was really thinking. I didn't want to admit to myself what I already knew. Knew that these caves were alive. I've been guiding tourists through the silent depths for nearly a decade. Most of the time it's easy money. People pay to see the eerie beauty of the underground, snap some pictures, and leave with stories of adventure. But then, there are the times when people don't leave. I thought I could ignore it at first. Dismiss the disappearances as bad luck or carelessness. That's what everyone else did. But when you've spent as much time here as I have, you start to see patterns. The way the air shifts, carrying faint whispers that shouldn't exist. The way the tunnels sometimes don't lead where they should. The way the silence presses down on you, making you feel like you're not alone. My dad used to guide tours here before me. He loved this place, called it his second home. When I was 10, he came down here alone one night to explore an uncharted section. He never came back. They searched for weeks but found nothing, just his notebook, left at the edge of a dark passage that didn't appear on any maps. In it, he'd scribbled a single word over and over: echo. I grew up hearing the local stories about the Hollow Man, a creature that lives deep in the Theria caves. They say it mimics voices to lure people into the dark, feeding on their fear. As a kid, I laughed it off, but now, I'm not so sure. Over the years, I've seen things I can't explain. Shadows, where there shouldn't be any. Whispers that don't belong to the living. And faces. Walls. Still, I keep coming back. Maybe it's guilt over the people I've lost. Maybe it's the need to prove. I'm not the coward I feel like every time I step into these caves. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe these caves want me here. I glanced back at the group. They were murmuring nervously, their flashlights darting around. Like fireflies in the dark, Sarah caught my eye. "Are you sure she's okay?" I hesitated. "We'll find her." But even as I said it, the whispers began again. This time, they weren't just calling Maria's Name. They were calling mine. Her voice echoed again, faint and hollow, pulling me deeper into the suffocating blackness. Help me, please. Words had been pulled from her throat and replayed on an old warped tape recorder. I held the flashlight steady, its pale beam dancing erratically across the damp, glistening walls. The air here felt heavier, colder. My fingers brushed against the chalk marks I'd left behind, and, for a fleeting moment, they gave me a sense of direction, of control. But as Maria's voice echoed again, that illusion shattered. I wasn't far from the others, yet the weight of the silence between her cries made it feel like I was alone. Then I saw it, her scarf. It hung loosely on a jagged rock, like it had been draped there deliberately, the soft fabric, glowing unnaturally against the oppressive shadows. My heart dropped into my stomach. Maria, I whispered, my voice thin and brittle, almost swallowed by the cave. As I stepped forward, the rustling of my boots on the gravel was deafening. I reached out, plucking the scarf from the rock, and scanned the area, my flashlight trembling in my grip. Nothing, only stone and shadow. Maria, I called again, louder this time. The air grew colder. A faint rustling sound echoed from the darkness ahead, sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. I turned the light toward the sound, the beam flickering briefly before stabilizing. Then I saw it. At the edge of the light, a figure stood motionless. It was tall and indistinct, its edges blurring into the shadows around it, like smoke clinging to the walls. Maria? The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It just stood there, the darkness rippling around it as though alive. I took a hesitant step forward, my gut twisting into knots. Every fiber of my being screamed at me. Meadow turned back, but I couldn't leave her. Not yet. The light flickered again, plunging me into momentary darkness. When it came back, the figure. I was gone. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tightening as a cold sweat broke out across my back. The air felt wrong, heavier, almost suffocating. It wasn't just the shadows pressing in on Meadow. It was something more, something I couldn't see, but could feel. I turned, retreating toward the group with quick, purposeful steps. My boots echoed louder than before, each crunch of gravel a reminder of how alone I was in that moment. When I rejoined the others, their faces were pale, their eyes filled with silent, desperate questions. Did you find her? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I held up the scarf, shaking my head. She's probably just a little further ahead, I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. As I spoke, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. From somewhere behind me, Maria's voice echoed again, clearer and more insistent. Help me. The group froze, their faces draining of color. They'd heard it too. Do you hear that? Olivia whispered, clutching her flashlight with both hands as though it was the only thing tethering her to reality. We all froze, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, only the crushing weight of silence. So thick it seemed alive. Then, faintly, it came. A whisper, soft and indistinct, drifting through the tunnels. Liam, Olivia, Ethan. The voices weren't loud, but they were unmistakable, each name repeated with eerie precision. My stomach clenched as I realized the whispers weren't just coming from one direction. They were hiding. They were everywhere, surrounding us. That's not her, Liam said, his voice sharp with panic. He turned to me, his flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. That's not Maria. We need to leave. Now. She's alive, Sarah argued, her voice rising in desperation. You heard her. We can't just leave her down here. She's dead, Liam snapped, his face twisted in fear. And if we don't leave, we'll be dead too. Their argument barely registered. My mind was fixed on the whispers. They weren't baiting. They were growing louder, more insistent. My flashlight swept across the walls, landing on the chalk marks I'd left, seemed to shift and change with every breath. Shut up, Olivia hissed, her voice trembling. Her flashlight darted toward the tunnel ahead. You hear it? It's closer. My heart thudded in my chest as I realized she was right. The whispers had changed. They weren't coming from behind us anymore. They were ahead, drawing us deeper into the cave. I clenched my jaw, gripping my flashlight so tightly my knuckles ached. We stick together, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. No one wanders off. Got it? The group nodded, their faces pale and drawn. Then it came again, a faint scraping sound, like nails dragging across stone. It was followed by a low, guttural noise that sent a shiver down my spine. "What the hell was that?" Liam whispered, his eyes wide. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The cave wasn't just playing tricks on us anymore. It was alive, and I was hunting. It was Olivia who found the hidden passage. She stumbled against the rock wall, her flashlight beam catching on a narrow opening I'd never seen before. The air that seeped out was colder than the rest of the cave, carrying a faint, metallic tang that burned the back of my throat. "It's not on the map," I muttered, staring at the jagged entrance. My gut twisted into knots. Before I could say anything else, Maria's voice echoed again. "Help me. I'm here." The sound was softer this time, more distant, but still unmistakable. "We have to try," Sarah said, her voice breaking. I hesitated, staring into the darkness beyond the passage. My instincts screamed at me to stay away, but Sarah's tear-grilled eyes pushed me forward. "Fine," I muttered. "Stay close. Don't touch anything." The passage was wrong. The walls weren't jagged or rough. They were smooth, almost polished, as if something had carved them deliberately. My flashlight beam reflected off the concrete siding, making the entire thing blur with a distance surface in warped, distorted patterns that seemed to shift as we moved. The air grew colder with every step, and the faint sound of tapping echoed around us. It wasn't constant, more like the irregular tapping of something trying to figure out where we were. "We shouldn't be here," Olivia muttered, her voice trembling. "No kidding," Liam said, his voice laced with fear. We moved deeper until the passage opened into a massive cavern. My breath caught in my throat. The room was a gaping pit, its edges surrounded by bones, human and otherwise. The bones were arranged in spirals, leading toward the dark hole like a grotesque offering. "Maria?" Sarah called, stepping closer to the edge. "Wait!" I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. The air near the pit was freezing, the metallic tang overwhelming. I aimed my flashlight into the pit, but the beam disappeared into the darkness. No bottom, no walls, just an endless void. And then, from the depths, a faint guttural whisper rose. "Atan." "Enough of this," Liam's voice cut through the whispers, loud and sharp like a crack in the cave's oppressive silence. Before I could stop him, he turned and bolted, his flashlight beam jerking wildly across the walls as he disappeared down the tunnel we'd come from. "Liam, wait!" I shouted, my voice ricocheting off the jagged walls. The whispers, soft and curling and twisting through the air like a taunt. His name curling and twisting through the air like a taunt. "Get him back," Sarah pleaded, grabbing my arm. Her fingers dug into my skin, her eyes wide. With panic, I tore away from her and sprinted after him, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. The light from his flashlight flickered in the distance, a tiny beacon in the overwhelming dark. "Liam, stop," I yelled. Then his scream erupted, raw and primal, cutting through the whispers and silencing everything else. It was the kind of sound that chills you to your core, filled with an animalistic fear I'd never heard before. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning as I turned the corner where his scream had come from. Lying in the dirt, it was his flashlight, its metal casing scratched and dented, but no sign of him. "Liam?" My voice was weak now, barely more than a whisper. I scanned the area, my flashlight darting across the walls, the ceiling, the floor. There was nothing. No blood, no sign of a struggle, just the flashlight, cold and abandoned in the dirt. Behind me, Sarah's footsteps approached, her breath hitching as she reached me. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice breaking. I shook my head, unable to speak. The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. They weren't just calling his name. Anymore, they were calling ours. "We need to leave," Olivia said, her voice trembling. She stood a few feet away, her flashlight shaking in her hands. "This place it's not right. We have to go." Sarah clung to me, her grip tight enough to bruise. "We can't leave him. He's still—" A low growl echoed from deeper in the tunnel, cutting her off. It wasn't the kind of growl you'd hear from an animal. It was deep, guttural, and somehow human. "We're not alone," Olivia whispered, stepping back. Her light caught movement at the edge of the tunnel, a fleeting shadow that melted into the darkness. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. But as I said it, the growl came again, closer this time, and the whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't understand. We weren't in control anymore. We moved in a tight cluster, our flashlights barely piercing the suffocating darkness. The air had changed. It was heavier now, thick with the metallic tang of damp stone and something else, something faintly sweet and rotten. "Are we going the right way?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We have to be," I said, but I wasn't sure. My chalk marks, once clear and reliable, had vanished from the walls. The tunnel seemed to twist and shift around us, like the cave was alive and deliberately trying to trap us. Olivia froze, her flashlight beam fixed on something ahead. "Do you see that?" I followed her light. At first, it seemed like a shadow, long, thin, and flickering, but then it moved, against the beam, sliding into the closet without a sound. "Sarah, stay behind me," I whispered, stepping forward. The figure emerged fully into the light and my blood turned to ice. It was tall and impossibly thin, its body shifting like smoke. Its face, or what should have been its face, was smooth and featureless, a blank slate of skin that rippled and pulsed, as if alive. And it spoke. "Ethan." My name echoed from its shapeless mouth, layered with the voices of the others. Liam's panicked scream, Olivia's trembling whispers, Sarah's desperate pleas. The sound was wrong, warped, like a symphony of despair. What is that?" Olivia stammered, stepping back. The creature tilted its head, its blank face turning toward me. "You've brought them to me, he said, its voice shifting to my father's. My chest tightened as the memories hit me like a tidal wave. My father's disappearance, the tourists who'd vanished, the whispers that never left me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's not true." The creature raised an elongated hand, its fingers stretching unnaturally long. "Look," it hissed. The flashlight beam fell on the walls and I gasped. The faces were there, hundreds of them, etched into the rock, their expressions frozen in silent agony. And there, among them, was my father. "No," I repeated, stepping back. My legs felt like they would give out beneath me. The creature took a step closer, its body dissolving and reforming as it moved. "You brought him." I was pleased when she pressed on to the real estate. "Here, and now you'll bring me more." "We have to go," Sarah whispered, clutching my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "We can't outrun it," I said, my voice hollow. "It's everywhere." But I had to try. I couldn't let her die here. I grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, scanning desperately for the faint chalk marks that should have guided us. Behind us, the creature followed, its whispers filling the air like a toxic fog. "Beeth," it used my voice now, warped and mocking. "You can't save her. You've never saved anyone." Sarah stumbled and I caught her, my flashlight swinging wildly. The beam landed on a tunnel, the same one we'd come through, or at least, I thought it was. "This way," I shouted, pulling her toward it. The whispers grew louder, and the creature's voice filled the space, echoing off the walls. "You belong to me, just like the others." Sarah sobbed, her grip on my hand tightening. "Don't let me go," she begged. "I won't," I said, though I wasn't sure it was a promise I could keep. The tunnel narrowed, forcing us to move a single file. I pushed Sarah ahead of me, urging her to keep going. Cold, oppressive energy wrapping around me like a noose. At the end of the tunnel, a faint light appeared. An exit. "Run!" I shouted, shoving Sarah forward. She hesitated, turning back toward me. "What about you?" "I'll hold it off," I said, my voice shaking. The creature's shadow filled the tunnel behind us, its form stretching and bending unnaturally. "Eatman," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. I pushed Sarah again. "Go!" She ran, her sobs echoing in the narrow space. I turned to face the creature, my flashlight shaking in my hands. "You want me?" I said, my voice trembling. "Take me." The creature paused, its featureless face tilting as if considering my words. Then it lunged. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me was Sarah's scream. Sarah's scream ripped through the tunnel, raw and jagged, before it dissolved into the endless black. Creature loomed before me, a shifting mass of shadows that defied shape or reason. It wasn't solid, yet it was there, its presence pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. "Eat then," it whispered, my name curling through the air like smoke. The sound was soft, almost intimate, but it carried a twisted familiarity. It wasn't just one voice. It was many, overlapping, as one of the three would. And from within my mind spoke out in words, blending together, Sarah's scream, Liam's last cry, and my father's fading shout from years ago. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam flickering weakly, illuminating the walls that seemed to ripple like liquid. And then I saw them, the faces, dozens, no, hundreds of them, etched into the stone. Their mouths were open, locked in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Each face looked so lifelike that I could almost hear their final moments. And then I saw his, my father, his face stretched out from the stone, his features twisted in agony. His mouth moved faintly, as if trying to say something, but no words came. No, I choked, stumbling backward. My heel caught on a jagged rock and I hit the ground. Hard. Pain shot up my back, but the terror numbed it. The creature moved closer, but it didn't rush. It didn't need to. The air around it grew colder, thick with the metallic tang of blood and rot. I wanted to run, to fight, to do anything but lie there, frozen. But my body refused to listen. The thing leaned closer, its faceless head tilting with an almost mocking curiosity. Its surface pulsed, rippling like something beneath it was trying to break free. My flashlight dimmed further, the beam now no more than a pale, trembling glow. "You've always belonged to me," it whispered. The word struck me like a physical blow. My chest tightened as its voice changed again, shifting into my father's. "No," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I didn't." It interrupted with a low, guttural laugh, a sound that reverberated through my bones. "You've fed me enough," it hissed, and then, in my own voice, added, "Now, it's your turn." I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. The air was gone, stolen by the thing that loomed over me. Its shadow stretched out, swallowing the light completely, and the last thing I thought was its blank face splitting open, revealing something endless and hungry within. Sarah ran. She didn't stop until she saw daylight. When she stumbled out of the cave, gasping and covered in dirt, she tried to tell the authorities what had happened, about the whispers, the faces, and the thing that took us. But no one believed her. They called her hysterical, dismissed her as delusional. They sealed the entrance. They thought that would be enough. But the cave doesn't stay silent. Locals have started whispering about strange sounds at night. They hear voices near the Motesk entrance, faint, distorted, calling for help. And always the same name, Ethan. Ethan. Inside the cave, I'm still here. At least, what's left of me is. My body feels like it's no longer mine. Like the stone has claimed me, molded me into part of its walls. My thoughts are slipping away, scattered into the darkness. Back. But I know it's not her. The hollow man is patient. It waits. Always watching. Always hungry. It lets me call out now. Lets me whisper to anyone who might hear. Like my father before me, I've become its lure. And it's only a matter of time before someone answers. If you dare, share this story. But remember, every retelling feeds the whispers. The more people who know, the louder they become. And the louder they get, the closer it comes to finding you. Are you sure you're alone as you finish reading this? Or is something already listening, waiting to call your name? The scream came from the crater, deep, raw, and human. I froze, gripping my flashlight. But the beam only caught swirling ash and smoke. It was mine, twisted and screaming, mouthing words I couldn't hear but somehow already knew. The air felt different, heavy, charged. My breath hitched as I stopped mid-step, the beam of my CAT-SCAM flashlight catching on the shifting smoke rising from the abyss below. At first there was only clank, 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 clank. The abyss below was filling with smoke, the dead weight my tumbled. Silence. Then, faint and distorted, I heard it. Caleb. I froze. Name. Caleb. It came again, faint and teasing, as if the mountain itself were calling me. My pulse quickened, and I glanced around, expecting to see one of my coworkers playing a cruel joke. But I was alone. Just me, the black void of the volcano, and that voice. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly. I aimed my flashlight toward the rim, but the beam was swallowed by the thick haze hanging over the crater. The voice didn't answer. I laughed nervously, the sound hollow even to my ears. "You're tired," I told myself. It had been a long shift, and the isolation out here could mess with anyone's head. Still, my heart thumped against my ribs as I kept walking, my boots crunching on the loose gravel of the crater rim. And then it came again, sharper this time. "Caleb, come closer." The voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't a whisper either. It bypassed my ears, resonating directly in my skull like an intrusive thought. My body stiffened, every nerve on edge. I gripped the flashlight tighter and swung it toward the sound. For a split second, the beam caught something, a flicker of shadow. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. No answer, just the crackle of cooling lava far below. I stepped closer to the edge, peering down into the abyss. The mist churned, swirling like smoke from a freshly lit fire. My stomach tightened as I leaned forward, the heat radiating upward in waves. Volcano. But as I pulled back, the beam of my flashlight caught something on the ground. Something metallic, half buried in the soot. I crouched down, brushing the dirt away with shaking fingers. A watch. Rusted, its leather strap frayed and brittle. Back unmistakable. Derek. My heart sank. I'd seen this watch before. Years ago, it had belonged to my best friend. The same friend who'd vanished on this mountain, swallowed by the eruption that should have killed me too. I hadn't seen the watch since the day he died. Caleb. The voice was closer now, almost directly in my ear. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the watch. And then I realized the voice came from the address, drifting closer with every step. My flashlight jerking as I whipped around to find the source. But there was no one there. Just the endless mist, curling and swirling, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I clenched the watch in my hand, the rust flaking against my palm. It didn't make sense. Derek's body had never been found, and this crater, this infernal place, was supposedly searched years ago. Yet here it was, as real as the heat radiating from the rocks beneath my nose. Derek. The memories hit me like a punch to the gut. It was my fault. I've always known that, though I've never said it out loud. Years ago, we were part of a rescue team stationed on Mount Devora. An unexpected eruption had sent pyroclastic flows hurtling down the mountain, burying everything in their path. We were supposed to evacuate a nearby research station, but we underestimated how quickly the lava would spread. I'll never forget the moment Derek slipped. 1 second, he was running behind me, yelling for Mantry. "Vito, keep going." The next, he was gone, swallowed by the ash and fire. I made it out. He didn't. I told everyone there was nothing I could do, that the heat and fumes were too intense to go back. Found the courage to act. It was too late. Derek's family begged for closure, but there was none to give. The eruption buried everything. They didn't even recover his body. I couldn't bring myself to attend the funeral. What would I have said? That failure has followed me ever since. It's why I'm here now, patrolling this desolate mountain, walking the same paths Derek and I used to take together. Maybe I wanted to find answers. Maybe I thought I could make peace with my guilt. Or maybe I just wanted to suffer. So the locals haven't made it easier. From the moment I arrived, they told me stories about the mountain, how it was alive, how it eats people who get too close. They warned me never to linger near the crater, never to listen too closely to its sounds. I laughed it off, dismissing their warnings as superstitions. But now, with Derek's watch in my pocket and whispers curling around me, I'm starting to think they weren't just stories. The voice came again that night, long after I'd retreated to the safety of the ranger station. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, the watch still clutched in my hand. Caleb. It was fainter now, muffled by the walls, but it was unmistakable. I sat up, my heart pounding. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the generator outside. I grabbed my flashlight and swung it around the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, seeing nothing. Nothing. But the voice didn't stop. Come closer. It wasn't coming from outside, it was inside my head, creeping into the cracks of my mind, pulling me back to the crater. I gripped the watch tighter, the metal biting into my palm. The air felt heavy again, the same way it had by the edge of the volcano. I I knew I should leave, call for help, but instead, I found myself standing, drawn toward the door, the whispering voice leading me back into the night. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew stronger, creeping into places they had no right to be. It started the next night. I was in my cabin, the faint hum of the generator masking the silence outside. Mind wouldn't quiet. Every time I drifted close to sleep, I'd hear it. Caleb. The voice was faint but clear, tugging me awake like an icy hand on my shoulder. My pulse quickened as I scanned the dark corners of the room. It was inside my head. I sat up, grabbing the flashlight. The beam swept across the room, illuminating the cracked walls and the cluttered desk. Nothing. Still, the voice lingered, just beneath the generator's hum. Then came the footsteps. They were faint at first, crunching in the ash outside the cabin. My breath hitched. It couldn't be Derek. It wasn't Derek, but the sound was deliberate, unmistakable, moving closer with every step. I grabbed the flashlight and swung open the door. Cold air bit at my skin as I stepped out into the night, away from the cabin. They weren't mine. The trail cut through the ash, heading straight for the crater. My stomach churned as I stood there, watching the prints dissolve into the swirling mist. I wanted to follow, to demand answers, but my legs refused to move. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something important, so I returned to the rim. That's when I found the notebook. It was half buried in the dirt, its pages charred around the edges. The scribbled handwriting was barely legible, filled with frantic, looping letters that seemed to spill from a mind unraveling. Most of it was nonsense. Ramblings about the crater, about voices, about it. But one phrase repeated on almost every page. The volcano knows. My hands trembled as I shut the book. I felt the weight of the crater behind me, pressing on my back like an unseen force. And for the first time, I knew the whispers weren't just a hallucination. The mountain was watching me. The whispers became unbearable that night. They weren't just calling my name. They were begging, pleading. Help me, Derek's voice echoed, clearer and more desperate than ever. I'm still here. I paced the cabin, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The voice wasn't fading. If anything, it was growing louder, resonating inside my skull. My chest tightened with every passing second. I couldn't take it anymore. Throwing on my jacket, I stepped out into the night. The cold air burned my lungs as I hurried toward the crater. I wasn't looking. The closer I got, the heavier the air became. It wasn't just the sulfuric heat. It was something else, something alive. The path to the rim was steep, and I'd walked it 100 times before. But this time, a new trail caught my eye. It was narrow and treacherous, winding down into the crater itself. I'd never seen it before, but it felt right, like it had always been there, waiting for me. The descent was hellish. The air grew hotter, the mist thicker, and the rocks beneath my boots pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, moving when I wasn't looking. Derek? I called, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own labored breathing. The whispers didn't answer, but they guided me, pushing me deeper. At the bottom of the crater, I found an opening, an archway carved into the rock. The walls glowed faintly, their surfaces slick and alive. The smell of decay hit me like a wave, metallic and suffocating. Inside, the chamber was littered with objects, backpacks, cameras, hiking boots, remnants of the missing. And then I saw him, Derek. He stood in the center of the room, facing away from me. His silhouette was familiar, but something about it was wrong. His body seemed stretched, his movements jerky, like a puppet on tangled strings. He turned, and my blood ran cold. It was Derek, or at least something wearing his face. Derek's face twisted into a smile, but it wasn't friendly. His eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to suck in the faint light from the chamber walls. You came, he said, his voice cold and echoing. I stumbled back, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Derek, is that you? He tilted his head, the movement unnatural, like his neck was too loose. You always come back, Caleb. That's why it chose you. Choose me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The mountain. Walls. It isn't just rock and fire. It's alive, Caleb. I'm hungry. I shook my head, backing toward the archway. No, you're lying. But Derek, or the thing wearing his face, took a step closer. You've fed it. Over and over. Again. No! I shouted, but the memories crashed over me. The footprints in the ash. The missing items. I ignored. The faces in the reports that haunted me every night. He smiled again, wider this time, his teeth sharp and glinting. You didn't save them, Caleb. You delivered them. The chamber walls began to shift, the faces of the missing emerging from the stone. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. I turned to run, but Derek's voice stopped me cold. You can't leave. Not without making a choice. I froze, my back to him. What choice? Stay, and take my place. His voice was soft now, almost pleading. Or leave, and bring it more. Those are the rules, Caleb. You can't fight the mountain. My breath caught as the room seemed to close in around me, the whispers growing louder, the faces pressing closer. The mountain had used me, and now it wanted more. The thing wearing Derek's face stared at me, its hollow black eyes drilling into mine. Its voice. It was calm, even kind, but it carried a weight that crushed my chest. You have to choose, Caleb, it said. Stay and take my place, or leave and bring it more. The chamber seemed to exhale, the air growing hotter and thicker with every second. The walls rippled like molten wax, faces pressing through the stone, silent, distorted, and screaming. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows that stretched and danced, mocking my indecision. Why me? I choked out, my voice barely audible over the rising hum. You've always been connected to it, Derek said, taking a step closer. His body moved, unnaturally, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Your guilt, your fear, it called, too. The mountain. It needs you to survive. My legs buckled, and I fell to my knees, the weight of his words crushing me. The whispers swirled around me, louder now, overlapping in a cacophony of torment. My name, over and over, mixed with cries for help and guttural, inhuman sounds. I can't, I whispered, shaking my head. You don't have a choice, Derek replied, his voice sharper now, his distorted smile stretching, impossibly wide. Stay, or spread its whispers. There's no third option. The ground beneath me trembled, and cracks began to spiderweb across the glowing floor. The faces in the walls contorted in agony, their mouths gaping open as if to scream, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening whispers. In that moment, clarity struck like a lightning bolt. The mountain didn't just feed on people. It fed on fear, on hesitation. It thrived on choices, on the torment they caused. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the notebook I'd found earlier. The pages fluttered wildly. In the heat, the words on them almost glowing. Without thinking, I hurled it into the glowing chasm at the center of the chamber. You don't control me, I said, my voice trembling. The reaction was immediate. Derek's form twisted, his body splitting into shards of shadow as he let out a scream that wasn't human. The chamber buckled, the walls collapsing inward as the mountain roared in fury. I turned and ran, the ground cracking beneath my feet. The mountain howled like a living thing, its roar echoing through the collapsing chamber. Rocks tumbled around me, the glowing cracks spreading like veins beneath my feet. My lungs burned with every breath, the air thick with ash and heat. The whispers didn't fade. I screamed, Caleb, you can't escape. I reached the narrow trail I'd descended earlier, scrambling up the loose rock on hands and knees. The edges of the path crumbled beneath me, sending chunks of stone tumbling into the shattered abyss. Below, stay with us, the whispers hissed, their tone almost seductive. You belong here. I bit back a sob, forcing myself to climb faster. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The air cooled slightly as I neared the rim, the oppressive heat giving way to the biting chill of Kubeliscu. The night. For a moment I lay on the ground, staring up at the stars. The mountain rumbled beneath me, but the whispers were distant now, like a fading echo. I staggered to my feet, my legs trembling as I turned back toward the crater. The mist had returned, swirling and obscuring the abyss. The glow was gone, the mountain eerily calm, but I knew it wasn't over. I stumbled back to the ranger station, every step feeling like a marathon. The cabin was dark and silent, the hum of the generator a welcome contrast to the deafening chaos I'd left behind. I collapsed onto the bunk, my mind racing. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Who would believe me? But as I closed my eyes, I heard it again. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Caleb, this isn't over. I bolted upright, staring into the darkness. The mountain wasn't done with me. Not yet. I thought I'd escaped. For weeks after that night, I convinced myself the mountain's grip had finally loosened. I returned to normal patrols, avoided the crater, and kept my flashlight close. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, faint and elusive, just quiet enough to make me question if they were real. At first it was subtle, a chill in the air when I was alone, a faint rustling sound when there was no wind. Then, the ash started appearing. I'd wake in the middle of the night to find a fine layer coating my windowsill, the faint scent of sulfur lingering in the air. The generator would in the background, masking the soft murmurs I could barely make out. Caleb. One night I woke to find my bunk covered in ash. My heart stopped as I saw the trail it formed, a perfect spiral, leading from the doorway to where I lay. My boots were untouched. The door locked from the inside. Corners of my mind. You can't leave. I requested a transfer. I didn't care where, as long as it was far from Mount Devora. Approval came quickly. Too quickly. I packed my things in silence, leaving the watch and notebook buried deep in the station's storage closet. I thought I could leave them behind. But 2 months after I moved, a package arrived at my new station. No return address. Just a plain, brown box, its corners smudged with ash. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was Derek's watch, polished and pristine, ticking steadily. Beneath it was the notebook, the same one I'd hurled into the mountain's fiery depths. The edges were no longer burned, and every page was blank except for the last one. Scrawled in jagged letters were the words, "You can't silence the mountain." The whispers came back that night, louder and clearer than ever. They no longer begged or pleaded. They were certain. If you dare, share this story. But remember, every retelling brings it closer to reality. The mountain's whispers grow stronger with each new voice, each new listener. Are you sure you're alone as you finish reading this? Or can you feel the mountain's stealthy breath, waiting for its turn to call your name?